So hello and welcome to the PT's PT podcast. With me today is Dr. Dave Watson. He is a good friend and a staff physical therapist at MGH's sports medicine clinic in Waltham.
Yeah, that's right.
Waltham. So without further ado, Dave's going to share some of his successful career with our listeners here tonight. And without further ado, Dave, why don't you go into a little bit about your background and maybe how we know each other a little bit too, and tell us.
Thank you for having me, Sean. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah.
And congratulations to you on the success that you've had in your career and starting your business as well.
Thank you.
For those of us that don't know, Sean and I are buddies. We actually were in the same graduating class at Northeastern. We graduated PT school back in 2012. And beyond that, we were good buddies. We've known each other since 2006 when we were freshmen. And we actually did a co-op together as well, our first co-op. So both Sean and I kind of had our first clinic experiences together. And it's funny that we've actually grown and both come a long way since then. So I'm sure a lot of our old mentors will be pretty proud of us to see both of us where we are, a good 15 years later.
Yeah,
so,
to share this.
Yeah, so I'm at MGH now in their sports medicine clinic. They have a new one in Waltham that just opened up in September 2022. They previously had their main sports clinic over in Cambridge Street in Boston, and they're expanding, especially with the MGB expansion all over the place. So we're gonna have some sports medicine clinics in Waltham, Foxborough, Fitchburg, Framingham, a few other places. So we opened up a brand new state-of-the-art facility back in September, which is really cool. We have the contracts with the Bruins, the Celtics, the Red Sox, Boston Ballet, not the Celtics, Patriots, Bruins, Red Sox, Ballet, military. So we get some pretty high level people coming in the offices, which is really fun. It's really a high level clinic to work in. And I'm proud to be there at this time. It took me a long time to get there. My road is a little bit indirect, but I'm really where I want to be now, which is really awesome.
That's awesome. So, I've got a ton of questions for you, but I guess my first question is, I want to hear, and I'm sure our listeners want to hear about, what you love so much about your job now and sort of like, I guess coming out of school and, how did your career and your vision of your career kind of pivot and change as you went through different cycles of it?
Yeah, that's awesome. So great question. When I first got into PT school, I think like many people, I wanted to work in sports and I wanted to work with athletes. And I think, I was probably discouraged away from that as a young PT. Just kind of, one of the first things they do in the first day of PT school is they say, raise your hand and do you want to work with athletes? And everyone raises their hand. And then they tell you, I think it was, you might remember the professor, she said, if you, don't want to work with elderly and other populations, then you should probably find a different profession to work in. I had a academic advisor kind of shy me away from co-ops and things that were more sports related. And so for the first few years of my career, I kind of focused more on a traditional outpatient orthopedic route, which I also enjoyed doing. That was actually how I got interested in physical therapy to begin with. I was an athlete, got injured in high school, went to a traditional outpatient orthopedic clinic, and I enjoyed that experience and I wanted to help athletes get better as well. But I also wanted to kind of push myself to a higher level of athlete and a higher level of clientele. So my first few years, I didn't pursue that as aggressively as I have recently. I, again, just kind of pursued more that traditional outpatient ortho route. So took my first job from a company that I actually met at a job fair at Northeastern, which was awesome that they were able to, help me get my first job. And actually, I can almost connect all of my jobs back to Northeastern, which is really cool. Had some great mentorship down there, some great experiences. I did 2 years at a clinic in Rhode Island that was focused on developing staff, brought a lot of continuing education in and had some really great mentors. After that, I moved back to Boston and worked for another private practice, a practice that I actually had known some of the staff members from my internship experiences at Northeastern. So that's how I got that job. And I worked my way up into a clinic management position there. And I spent about 3 years in that role or with that company before I moved on back to another company that I had done a co-op with at Northeastern, because that company was offering a lot of continuing education, including a residency and a fellowship. So I jumped onto that opportunity and I stayed in a clinic management role there as well. And then I actually got into an entrepreneurial role, opening my own branch of their office. And I ran into some interesting challenges, kind of pushing myself outside my comfort zone, got into the marketing and the networking field a little bit. And then after some time doing that, I decided that wasn't exactly my passion. And I wanted to reconnect with what I really was passionate about, getting into physical therapy. And what was awesome is that throughout my experiences, I had so much mentorship and so much career development with continuing education and residencies and fellowships that I found myself to be marketable to a place like MGH. And so, when I saw the advertisement that MGH Sports was expanding and that they were looking for staff, they were looking for people with advanced credentials in residency and fellowship training. And I fit that. And so, it just kind of, the timing worked out right, where I actually got hired about a year before they opened their brand new sports facility. So I could kind of get my feet on the ground and kind of learn the MGH way of doing things right before we opened up our new facility. So now I'm back working more in a kind of sports specific field, and I'm doing what I wanted to do, and really loving working with that higher level population and having that really state of the art equipment, and also working in a hospital is a different environment than working in a private practice, which I never knew how much I would enjoy doing. So really happy about where my career has taken me. I say it was an indirect route because I think, and these are some questions you might ask me later on, but some of my advice I'll have for younger PTs is to just go directly towards what you want to do and what you're passionate about right away. It's great that I took some small stepping stones along the way that ended up leading me to where I want to be, but I may have been able to do it quite a bit faster if I had kind of not listened to the noise and just gone with what I was passionate about from the start.
That's obviously one of the questions that that I ask is like, hey, like if you were to give yourself your younger self some advice, it sounds like you'd say, hey, listen, just lean into your passion and just go toward that. Tell me about maybe a mistake that you made earlier in your career. It doesn't have to be, it could be around, following your passion or not, but that you wish you could have avoided, and what would you have done instead?
Yeah, I think early on in my career, my continuing education was focused more on like adding tools to my toolbox. So I did Graston, I did dry needling, I did spinal manipulation, I did orthotic fitting, I did a gait analysis class, all random classes from different providers, no set method or anything. I didn't study the McKenzie method. I didn't study the Maitland. I didn't study the Kaltenborn. I didn't pick a direction. I was kind of like jack of all trades, master of none. And I was learning tools. I wasn't learning diagnosis, evaluation, intervention. So I was making myself a good technician, but not a great clinician, not a good diagnostician. So I think when I finally got into my third job, the company that provided a residency and a fellowship, I joined into the Institute of Orthopedic Manual Therapy, which is run by Martin Langus. He's kind of a second generation PT from Kaltenborn. And so I got into learning that method from start to finish, a full year residency. And then after that, a year-long fellowship at Boston University in manual therapy. So I really got a little bit more of a focused continuing education that really developed my ability to diagnose and to evaluate and to determine a plan of care, so I could better apply those tools that I learned earlier in my career. So I think instead of just focusing on like learning how to use different interventions, I think a young PT should focus more on really how knowing the root cause of the problem and really being able to diagnose and not just treat impairments.
Would you recommend like a residency program right out of school, or like what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, so I was about 5 years into my career when I did the Institute of Orthopedic Manual Therapy, and I think that what I realized is that everything that I kind of took from more senior clinicians, all the bits and pieces I put together from mentors that I gained over those 5 years, I would have learned in that residency in that 1 year. I think it could be a little overwhelming for like a new grad in your first year. But I think in like year 2 or 3, like once you have your feet on the ground and you're a little bit more comfortable in the in the clinic environment, then it's a great time to kind of get 5-10 years of career experience in 1 year. And it is really overwhelming. It's a lot to do a residency on top of treating patients and things like that. It's a large commitment, but I think in order to be good at what we do, you've got to be able to put that commitment in.
Yeah, so definitely do it before kids, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Now, how many hours a week would you say you committed to treating, and working, and then how many hours a week would you do the residency training?
Yeah, so with the Institute of Manual Therapy, it's about 8 hours a week of class plus the 40 hours a week of treating. And then there was lab time and mentorship time. And it was year round. And so it was, a 56-hour work week plus some extra mentoring. So it was probably a 60-hour work week. And then learning on your own as well. And so it's pretty intense to do, 60-hour work week, and you don't get paid for doing a residency. So it's, some other people would better, work per diem for 20 hours a week instead of, work for free. But I think it's invaluable what you can learn in the residency.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you put it in perspective, and I'm sure you worked on Saturday and Sunday, but like for our listeners, like that's 7 to 7 every day of the week.
Yeah.
So, Monday through Friday at least. And, I had a similar experience when I did my OCS training at MGH in Charlestown. It was like every Saturday for 8 hours for like a year.
Yeah. And
And
that's what the fellowship was. Yeah.
yeah, and so we talk about and one thing I always want to touch on is burnout, and how busy our profession is, and how it's it can be a lot, both physically and emotionally tolling on us. I want to let's kind of lean into that a little bit, and what sort of strategies, Dave, have you used over the years to stay fresh and to try to avoid that feeling of burnout?
It's really tough. I think I've probably fallen victim to it a couple of times, which has maybe led to some of my career changes, not necessarily career change, but job change from one location to another. I think sometimes you can get stale if you're not trying to push yourself to get better. I think it's really important to work in an environment where there are people better than you so that you can learn from them and be motivated by them. People that are pushing themselves to learn more, and people that aren't just clocking in and clocking out.
Hang on, lost you for a second there. You there? I don't know what happened there. We kind of
That's
just
okay. Yeah, you froze a little bit.
go ahead. Sorry, I don't know where
Oh
we
yeah, where did I leave off?
we were talking about well, just the residency training thing, I think.
Okay.
The burnout.
Oh, burnout. Yeah. Oh, so I was saying like, yeah, keeping yourself around like motivated people will keep you motivated, but also you got to make sure that you're treating the clientele that you want to treat. I think if you're in an environment where you're doing a lot of joint replacements, but that's not really what you like to do, you'd prefer to be working with more of a younger clientele. Then you need to try to find the setting that you're going to be comfortable working in, and then you make sure that you got to have fun outside of work. Even if you're doing marketing, you got to have a company softball. No, not a company softball team, a social softball team. You got to like going to the gym. You got to walk your dog. You got to have a social life outside of work, and you got to take time off. I think it's really hard in the PT world to take time off, especially if you're in a small private practice and you feel like your coworker is going to have to take on the load of your case, or you feel like your patients are going to, be left behind for a couple of weeks. You have to prioritize yourself. If you can't take care of your own health, then you won't be able to take care of other people's health. So time off is important. And even though as PTs we all say yes to everything, you have to be able to say no every now and then. In terms of if somebody, if a patient is asking you to stay late or come in early, and you've got a full schedule and you've got no openings for 3 weeks, if you do that to yourself week after week after week, you're not going to last long. So you do have to find when it's the right time to squeeze someone in and when it's not.
Yeah, I think those boundaries are huge. I personally am terrible at them because I never say no.
Mhm.
And I think that just comes with time and kind of like managing the right balance of whoever you're kind of fitting in and fitting around the schedule. But that's such a good point. I think, having a hobby outside of PT is huge, and really a life outside of work, and I think that can be so rejuvenating, or it can go the other way and be, it can be taxing. So I think, really focusing on, to your point, um, putting some energy into the tank and some gas into the tank outside of work so that you feel like when you get to work, like it's where you want to be.
Yeah, you got to refuel.
Got to refuel. Tell me, what do you love, Dave, most about being a PT?
Yeah, I think today was like a perfect example, actually. I came into work and the very first thing I did was check my email, and I had 2 messages from past patients. And I get nervous when I see those. I'm like, oh no, are they reaching out because something's not going well?
Yeah.
But both of them were positive messages. One is a young man who I had helped recover from a labrum repair in his shoulder about a year ago. And he had come back to me for a grade 3 ankle sprain. And he's a basketball player, a real athletic guy. And I had gotten him back to basketball after the labrum, so he came back to see me after his ankle. And I worked with him for a few visits, but he'd already had PT early in the year. He was getting to his authorization limits. Out-of-pocket cost is pretty high. So I educated him on what to do on his own and how to ease himself back into practice and into game. And then I wasn't able to continue seeing him. And he had sent me a message today saying like he played in his first game, scored 39 points, and never felt better. So he took the advice that I gave him, and he was able to complete his plan of care, and then reach back out to me to tell me how good he was feeling. And the other patient is a member of the Boston Symphony Orchestra who has been in and out of performance for many years due to a cervical radiculopathy based on posture holding the instrument. And that's kind of a life altering, it's like working with a professional athlete. It's a life altering thing if they can't perform at their high level. And we were able to get her back to perform, and she felt like this was the first time that she wasn't just putting a band-aid on it, that she actually fixed the problem. And so she doesn't expect to have to be out every couple of months like she has been the last few years. And so she wrote back just to say thank you, and that her summer performances are going well, and that she wanted my information to share with some of her coworkers. So I look forward to treating some more professional musicians later on this year. So I think when you have those success stories, when you get people that meet their goals and get back to where they want to be, that's why we get out of bed in the morning. And so that's a great way to start the day when you get those emails.
I mean, 100%, because I think we've all been on the receiving ends of the bad feedback too, or like, and
Exactly.
it's always good when you get the positive ones. But no, I think that's great. I think
Yeah, most of the time it's like reviews, right? If you have a bad experience, you tell 30 people. If you have a good experience, you tell 3 or something like that.
yeah,
So we get all the emails of I tried to play basketball and my ankle swelled up and it didn't go that great, and what should I do? So it's awesome when somebody says, oh yeah, everything you told me worked perfect.
yeah, it's perfect. Now, I assume throughout your career, you've taken clinical students.
Yes. Yeah. A
Um,
few times from Northeastern and from MGH.
yeah, so tell me about that, and tell me a little bit about, how that's, what you like about that, about teaching.
Yeah. So teaching is an awesome experience. The thing about teaching is it helps you reflect on your own skill set. When you're trying to educate someone on one of the reasons why you do something, you might have to kind of reflect on your own care and why do you do the intervention that you choose. Sometimes it forces you to reflect back on some of the research and actually, refresh yourself and get updated. Sometimes you learn brand new things from students that they're teaching in school that you don't actually, never heard about. But then also times you can share all of the kind of behind the scenes things that we're talking about today about, how to build your career path, how to seek mentorship, and how to look for a new job, how to interview, all of those kind of things that, like at Northeastern, we were spoiled to have classes on interview and job search and things like that. But other kids are not having that experience. And so they need help on job searching and interviewing and networking. And I like to be able to provide some of that feedback in addition to some of the clinical feedback.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, I still talk to, some of my CIs, and, I think it's, you really create a lifelong relationship. And, now tell me about, one of the questions that I commonly get, and I'm sure you do too, if you interview people, and I'm sure you did as a clinic director, is, what is your mentorship program like, right? So, talk to me about, your mentor journey, as both probably a mentee and a mentor, and how do you feel like, what do you think a new grad mentorship program should entail?
Yeah. I think first of all, any PT should be a lifelong learner, and we should all be receiving mentoring. I mean, even you, I'm sure, as a business owner, are seeking mentoring from people who've built bigger PT empires. There's always something to learn. I think that as a new grad, I worked at a company that was really outstanding at providing customer service and communication training. Um, so we had mentors that they did like training sessions where we would like sit, look each other in the eyes, try not to laugh. Some person plays a role of like a patient who's injured and says, "I don't want to come to PT. PT is too expensive. I'm too busy. I don't have a ride." And then the other person has to sit there and like explain to that patient, why PT is important, like why their quality of life is going to get better if they do PT. We had to practice all of those things. Practice a patient calling on the phone, wanting to cancel, and trying to explain to them why it's in their best interest to get their bodies better. I had so much mentorship on, just how to be a professional in a clinic. Um, less about clinical skills and more about professional skills. And then also, I had some really outstanding clinical people in my practice as well. I was offered out of college, I was offered my first job to be in a de novo location with one other PT, and we would be kind of splitting shifts. I'd be morning, he'd be night, and vice versa. And I didn't think that would be a good idea as a new grad to be in a clinic without really any supervision or without any advanced, senior clinician to learn from. So for me as a new grad, I sought out companies that had senior clinicians and that provided that kind of structured mentoring. So we had those courses on like looking people in the eye and communication. We had those, if not monthly, it was at least quarterly, and it was very structured. And I knew that before I got hired. They kind of gave me a plan of what are the courses for this next year that we've already got planned. That company also did bring in clinical courses as well on maybe a less frequent basis. But that was one of the main things that attracted me to that company. Then the second company I worked for actually had quite a different approach. They were more focused on actually hiring senior clinicians that didn't really need as much mentoring. But we did something called PT coaching, where we had like a senior PT just observe you do a session and just then sit down quietly, without the patient, just be like, what did we like, what did we didn't like, what we might do differently, just kind of peer to peer. But even in that environment, I took the initiative to seek out some of the more senior PTs who I really valued the way they evaluated people. I valued the way they got people better quickly, and I evaluated the way they interacted with patients. And I just, tugged on their coattails and said, "Show me what you do." Um, and and then, going back to that company that had the residency and the fellowship, that was a co-op that I had worked for. And so my co-op supervisor had educated me on the residency and the fellowship programs that they had available while I was a co-op. And he really kind of lit a fire in me about like clinic management. And so, he inspired me to want to become a clinic manager. And so when I finally had the opportunity to go back and join them, I was very excited to jump into the mentoring with the residency and the fellowship. So I think I've been in, a few different private practices where two of them really brought in a lot of continuing education. Some that were just courses from all different providers, some that were really just a standardized, this is one method. But both of those would be, positive environments for a young person to go work in.
That's great. And I think, you bring up your co-op supervisor, telling you to be a clinic director. What do you feel? Do you feel as though that was because, like, I guess, what about being a clinic director did he see in you, and what did you like about it, and what didn't you like about it?
Well, I think what someone sees is like your willingness to kind of go the extra mile, to put the patient first, to put the clinic first, someone that can take a lot of extra responsibility and not get flustered, someone that can multitask. This person always talked about being on roller skates and being able to keep things moving smooth, and then just seeing him in the role that he had, and the leadership that he provided, and the way that others looked up to him, I think that I wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps. And so maybe less of him being like, "Oh, you'd be really good at this," and more so just him kind of pointing out that you're a great co-op, you go above and beyond, and then me kind of wanting to kind of just follow it in those footsteps and say, I want to be able to give back to people the way that you can give back to people. And that's what made me interested in wanting to be a manager.
That's cool. What about his leadership did you like the most?
Yeah, he was a fun guy to work for. He was down to earth, easy to talk to. I'll never forget when I interviewed for him. It was Halloween and he was dressed as Top Gun. So that we started off on a pretty good note.
Oh, Goose or
Um,
Maverick?
I think it was Maverick.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure which one's Tom Cruise. Maverick, right?
I think Maverick. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think he was
Yeah.
Maverick.
Love it.
I have to go back and ask, but yeah. So he was just like, he was somebody that I'd be friends with outside of work,
Yeah.
but he was 20 years older than me and mature and experienced and professional, but still comforting.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, as an owner and as, a manager and all of that, I think, the connection piece is huge. And, I think not that you can be friends with all your staff or, that's tough, but I think just, being empathetic to the, everybody's individual scenario is great.
You
And
got
a
to show that you care about your staff and not just about the outcomes.
right, right. And it's a process, and I think everything takes time, and just like patients take time to get better, it takes time to develop those relationships. But tell me about, I guess, what advice would you give new grads to should they want to follow in Dave Watson's footsteps? What like maybe one or two pieces of advice as we wrap up here would you give if they wanted to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier, but I think stick to what you really are passionate about, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. Whether it's starting your own practice, I think I recall you going door to door into people's gyms and things before you had a brick and mortar. And then, eventually, building your clientele to where you had a brick and mortar. Now you have three, and your goal is expanding. And If someone, I'm sure, told you once in your life that maybe, that wouldn't be right for you, or it'd be too hard for you, or don't do it, but you did it anyway. And I think if you want to work in a particular population, then find out what it takes to do so, and then go do it. Don't let anybody get in your way.
I love that advice. I think the biggest motivator to me are is that person who said, hey, like, you're not going to be able to do this, or like, you're not going to be successful, or you're not going to be able to, reach your vision of 10 clinics in 10 years, or whatever it is, and I think that, I mean, I totally agree. And I also would add to that, like, just having a clear vision, coming out of school, like, I had no clue what I really wanted to do. Like, athletes are cool to work with, you know, and all that jazz. And I think everybody, like you said, wants to work with athletes because it's fun population. I worked at Northeastern at the clinic there, and it was like all literally college kids. That was awesome. It was like I was on vacation every day. But it's not real life. Like, that's not a demographic that you're going to see at every clinic. So I totally agree. Follow, try to find a passion over the first couple of years, and then just kind of lean into it a little bit. And if it's uncomfortable, that means that you're learning and growing.
Exactly.
Clinic manager and, owner of clinics, and like, those aren't the only directions that you can go as a physical therapist. There are so many different options.
Right, exactly.
So tell me
And
about the network. And
yeah, I was just about to say, networking is really also one of the pieces of advice I would give to people is build those relationships from an early start, and maintain them, and foster them. Don't let them slip. If you even your peers, you never know which one of your classmates is someday going to be in a position where they may be able to provide an opportunity for you, or vice versa. So make sure PT is a small community, and networking is extremely important.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, look at us on this call 12 years later, so
Exactly. Yeah.
all right, rapid fire questions for the end. All right, so favorite concert?
Jay-Z and Justin Timberlake at Fenway Park.
Nice. Best meal you've ever had?
Oh, best meal.
And
Oh
who did you
man.
share it with?
Oh wow. That's a hard question. So best meal, probably I would say it's probably something in Portugal with my wife when we went on vacation. Nothing too fancy. You know what I'll say? It's called, I'm gonna mispronounce it. It's called cozida. It's all kinds of meat and vegetables put in a pot, buried underneath the volcano, and cooked in the heat of the volcano. So we did that in the Azores this past year, and that was really fun.
I mean, that sounds incredible.
Yeah, it was delicious, amazing. Everything just falls apart, and even the vegetables taste like meat.
I love that. What does it mean to be a great PT?
I think being a great PT means being empathetic, being passionate, being a lifelong learner, and just always giving your all.
Mantra for Dave Watson's life.
I think the mantra for my life is set goals, and I'm a goal setter. I have to have a target to work towards, and if I'm not doing that, then I'm falling behind. And so, like, if you're not trying to get better, you're losing. So just keep on pushing yourself, keep growing, and keep getting better every day.
Love that. Dave, thanks for joining me tonight. And I'm sure this is such great information for all of our audience. How can they reach out to you if they'd like to further connect?
So yeah, best way to find me is on LinkedIn. I should be very easy to find. David Watson probably is how you'll find me. My email, dawatson@mgh.harvard.edu.
And I can put
So
all that stuff in the show notes too, Dave. So perfect.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yep.
all right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again for joining us, Dave. And running out of time here, but really appreciate your time, and this was great.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It's great to catch up with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.